This episode is sponsored by Seats One, the all-in-one platform supporting universities such as Kingston, Manchester and Roehampton. From tracking attendance and student engagement to ensuring compliance and optimising campus space, Seats One gives higher education teams the tools they need to stay ahead. With AI-powered engagement scores, powerful analytics and automated early alerts, Seats One helps staff identify at-risk students faster and act sooner. If you're looking to make data-driven decisions, improve financial outcomes and streamline operations, visit seatsoftware.com to learn more. I'm Susanna Marsden, a higher education consultant who helps to develop and support HE institutions in the UK and beyond. This podcast takes a deep dive into the roles of people who work in this hugely varied higher education sector. Each episode reveals what's involved in a specific role, the career path that led to it, and tips on how to get in and get on in these jobs. My guest in this episode is Simon Goldsmith, Head of Sustainability at the University of Greenwich. Simon works with colleagues across and outside the institution to help embed environmental sustainability into all aspects of university life and to support the strategic goal of the University of Greenwich being a recognised leader in this field by 2030. Simon explores various strategic initiatives that the university is progressing, discusses the different opportunities at the 3 different campuses, and reflects upon the importance of partnerships. He also shares how each of us can make a difference to creating a more sustainable society and why working in sustainability can be such a positive career choice. Simon, welcome to Job Shadowing HE and thanks for being my guest in this episode. You're Head of Sustainability at the University of Greenwich. Can you give us an overview of the work that you and your team do and also share a bit of insight into what's really meant by the term sustainability?
Well, hello, Susanna. Yes, sustainability is about leaving the planet in a better condition than we found it. So it's just really thinking about how we avoid those impacts and really help solve the challenges that we face. And not just now, but really thinking ahead. This is about our children, our grandchildren, and many generations from now. So the impacts that we have now are going to impact them. So the idea is very much thinking about how we can think from an environmental point of view, a social point of view, an economic point of view. We can align those 3 areas to deliver what we would like, that future that we would also like to live in. So yes, I'm Head of Strategic Sustainability at the University of Greenwich. And my role very much is helping the organisation understand really what sustainability is, kind of from that big strategic piece, thinking about how we can look at our social impacts and reduce those, identify those opportunities where we can deliver social benefit, but also from an environmental point of view of just thinking, well, actually, we've got huge numbers of potential issues, and obviously, climate change being one of them. We as an organisation have responsibilities to think, actually, what are we doing about this? How can we help solve this? And from a university's point of view, we're in a really amazing position because, again, operationally, we have lots of large estates with big impacts in terms of things like energy, waste, water. We have natural spaces. We buy in lots of stuff. And all those potentially can be challenges. So we've got to think, actually, how do we reduce those kind of impacts and how do we create benefits from that? So that's where sustainability really adds a huge amount of connectivity, because what we can do is begin that process of thinking, well, actually, these are all impacts. And as an organization that thrives on its intellectual capabilities and capacity, then we can think, well, how do we, call on our academics to help solve some of these challenges? How do they help solve our net zero challenges? How do they involve their students potentially in behavioral issues around sustainability? For example, how do we solve that challenge of getting somebody to put their coffee cup in the right bin? It's as simple as that often. So we can engage our staff in the on-the-ground behaviour change, but also from a teaching point of view, our teaching staff can think, actually, how do we deliver teaching that the future needs so we can graduate our students to go out and solve those real-world problems? And if we can kind of begin that process of asking our academics to sort of look at their research areas through the lens of sustainability, then they can think, really, actually, how do we help solve that? Because it's not just about, sort of putting in an energy efficient electrical system. It can be about behavioral. It can be about health issues. It can be about education. It can be any number of things that any university is teaching day in, day out. So from our point of view, it's very much helping people understand, actually, there's something really important here. And because sustainability is not just, it can never really be delivered in silos. We've got an opportunity of really connecting it all up. So again, our operations relate to how we can teach. We can identify those challenges in terms of things like data. We've got huge amounts of data. So our business analytical students can use that data to help them understand the real world and hopefully come back with us with some solutions as to how to better interpret or respond to the data that we've got. So there's tons and tons of those sorts of things that we can really think about across the university. And bearing in mind also, sustainability is not delivered just individually, it's through partnerships. So it's not just about university looking inwards, it's about how we kind of create that reach with corporate partners, with other partners that we're working with in terms of local authorities or other agencies that have an interest in helping us help them solve their challenges that they face.
And you've held your post at Greenwich since 2013. What was your career background up to that point? And has sustainability always been your focus?
Yeah, I've always had a sustainability interest. I grew up in rural West Wales, so most of my time was spent building tree houses and dams in the streams there. So I was kind of always kind of like connected, I suppose. And then watching like David Attenborough, sort of Life on Earth, I think he probably sparked that kind of curiosity and interest in sustainability. And I kind of knew at the time that, I could go and help protect these amazing animals, birds, and what have you that he showed. But it clicked quite early on with me because I could become an environmental conservationist working in Africa or somewhere like that. But that only helps protect those ecosystems. The realization really was that human beings are creating the challenge through everything that we do in the West, everything we do globally. And I think my interest was then thinking, actually, how do I help change the systems that kind of create those problems that are faced around the world? So through school, I studied those sorts of subjects that related to sort of more environmental stuff, because sustainability really wasn't a term then. So kind of geography and these sorts of areas. I did a geography degree, and then I did a master's which was Y College at the time. It was taken over by Imperial to do one of the kind of first masters in sustainability. So I did that for a year, amazing year. Then I set my own consultancy up in London, working with organizations who had an interest in really delivering more fundamental sustainability and understanding it rather than just from a kind of a waste or a carbon point of view, just thinking actually, how do we change our systems? So I did that, and then another email popped up saying, well, actually, there's a really interesting job you should have a look at the University of Greenwich, which wasn't too far from where I lived. And I thought, well, yeah, that'd be interesting, because the university had done some really interesting sustainability stuff. And at the time, I was really thinking about how do we create levers for change? So when you think about sustainability, we can all do our bit ultimately, and that can all add up. That's really good work. But there are certain parts of society that if we work well to integrate sustainability, then they can be real levers for change. So the HE sector is one of those. Again, the universities spend huge amounts of money. They have huge amounts of impact. We have huge amounts of opportunities for research. So it's probably one of the kind of top 10 levers for change globally. And I thought, well, if we can work with a higher education organization and think, well, what's possible? How do we enable our universities to realize the value of sustainability and its relevance? Then if we've got that, then, and we can prove that sustainability is really a positive element or strategic element of what universities do, then other universities will want to say, actually, yeah, this is really good. I'd like to do what you want to do. And that's, I think, where we got to, and that's where we are now, where there's more and more interest in how universities can deliver sustainability. There's more and more opportunities for having those conversations with politicians, with businesses, with partners to say, well, actually, this is what we can do. This is how we can help you. Let's start talking. And if we can do that, not just in Southeast London, but in London, or across the UK or around the world, then I think we've got a huge opportunity to accelerate sustainability change. Again, thinking about all those graduates who leave every year, if they had that kind of mentality of thinking, how do we solve these challenges these organizations face? Brilliant, let's go and do that. Or those researchers are thinking, actually, if I applied my research in a slightly different way or worked with a different discipline, maybe that can really accelerate the impact of my research. So it's just amazing what the potential is. And I'm really interested in seeing how we can lever that.
And picking up on your point there about the levers for change, I mean, the University of Greenwich Strategy 2030 embeds that focus on the importance of sustainability. And by 2030, the university says it will be a recognised leader in putting sustainability at the heart of teaching, research, partnerships, services, all the things you've just talked about there, to help build a more sustainable society. So, significant agenda. What do those words look like in practice at the university at the moment?
Yeah, so sustainability is at the heart of everything we do. And within our sustainability strategic action plan, kind of one of those kind of definitions or quotes is that we will deliver sustainability excellence in everything we do. So that gives us an opportunity to really have those conversations with an organization that culturally gets sustainability. Our Vice Chancellor is a real advocate and supporter of sustainability. And not just the Vice Chancellor, but across the VCE, Vice Chancellor Executive Team, across our the different levels within the organization. And it's not just a kind of top-down thing, it's very much a bottom-up thing. So within the University of Greenwich, we all understand that sustainability is really important. We all understand what we can do to help move it forward. And that gives me a really strong opportunity. I can reach out to anybody in the university and they're happy then to report and engage with me. Sustainability is seen as a strategic element of what we're doing. So that's Sustainability Strategic Action Plan. It has a requirement for our senior team to deliver sustainability in their work rather than in my work, because by putting sustainability really centrally within our kind of governance and KPI delivery, then it kind of takes it away from me. Sustainability is no longer on that kind of edge. It's actually at the center. And the more it's at the center, the more we can identify those relationships and those opportunities. And that's what we're finding now. We launched that action plan in November, and we're working on the delivery plans. And the more we work on the delivery plans, the more we identify those opportunities for students and student success, the research opportunities, partnerships, how we work as an organization, how our people directorate works, how sustainability drive our professional development, how does it drive up the work that we're doing around our buildings, our IT use, pretty much everything really. And on the ground, we've got roughly 2,000 staff, of which we're kind of nearing 100 green champions. So in terms of the number of people who have stepped forward and said, well, actually, I want to do something a bit more formalized, then there's a real interest in that. But we've also got lots and lots of other ways that we're engaging our staff. And again, as I said, I think we're quite lucky. We've made a huge amount of progress. There's a huge amount more to do. And I think we're kind of, we are kind of seen as a leader because I think that we are willing to do things differently, try and change the system more, and deliver impact, not just through the sustainability team, but giving that kind of responsibility, giving that opportunity to staff across the university to themselves to take actions and do the things that we would love them to do. We facilitate that. So, we can't be sustainability leaders everywhere, but there are sustainability leaders out there that we can support. And bearing in mind, we've got a team of a direct team that I manage of 6 of us. But ultimately, we've got a team of over 2,000 staff in our team, our sustainability team. We've got 25,000+ students who are also, we're bringing in, we're supporting them to be part of the team. So, again, people are interested in their futures. People are interested in sustainability. We've got to sometimes work hard to make that connection and to make sure that there's those kind of responsible behaviors. But again, people can't say, no, I'm not interested in this. They rarely do. They sometimes do, but not always.
And you mentioned earlier about how the KPIs are embedded into senior colleagues' objectives. I'm wondering if you can say a bit more about, what your working relationships look like with colleagues across the university. What's your role? Where does that stop? What's their role? How does it all join together in making the strategy happen?
Yeah, I think as with any relationship within an organization, there's a lot of trust. You've got to be able to illustrate that you can work with people. And I think sustainability is very much about working with people to help them with some of their challenges. And I think what we've been able to do is kind of bring ideas and perspectives, kind of solutions, different ways of thinking, that ability to connect things up, kind of identifying the opportunities that perhaps may otherwise be missed. And I think that's where we can really come forward and say, actually, let's kind of change the narrative or change the perspective and deliver something completely different or far more impactful. And I think what we've been able to do is kind of build on that trust, illustrate really what we're capable of, so that now people, again, rather than us kind of being, us having to knock on people's doors, they're knocking on our doors because they know that we've probably got that answer to their question, or we've got, we know somebody they need to know, or whatever it is, that we're finding that's now the position we're in. Because sustainability challenges and opportunities are coming up across the organization. There's not yet the capability locally to solve all these issues. So they need somebody to help. And that's where we come in. And I think from a corporate point of view, I work with, I'll work with people, the cleaners some days and help them and work with them, trying to understand what they're doing, all the way up to the VCE and the board, governing body, to help them understand sustainability a bit more, help illustrate why we're doing it. It doesn't happen overnight, but what we're doing is making sure that sustainability isn't just kind of a newfangled thing that people might, it's kind of like it's going to go away, isn't it? It's not going to go away. We won't go away because we don't need to. Sustainability kind of sells itself. So I think, for us at Greenwich, and I think for any organisation, is that what I'd say is just really work with your sustainability team.
You talked just there about the full range of people that you liaise with and the way in which you and your team connect everything together. Can you give us a bit of insight about, what a typical, I'm sure there isn't a typical, but what a period of, say, a month looks like for you in your role? What's the range of activities that you're focusing on?
It's kind of everything, really. So again, from month is kind of a good time period. I might be doing some bin audits or working out really why a particular part of the university is not recycling so well. Starting point, maybe. But then you might be like looking at all the data. You might be thinking, well, actually, how much energy are we using? How does that compare across organizations or the buildings ourselves? How do we identify those ways we can reduce the carbon emissions? So there's quite a lot of that day-to-day stuff. And then you're kind of thinking, well, actually, an organization like a university has spending quite a lot of money in procurement, in maybe buying or building a new building. So tens of millions of pounds spent. That building will need to be sustainable nowadays. So who can give that insight? So again, I'm sitting on the steering groups of construction buildings, making sure that sustainability is part of those projects. We may be working with academics to help them understand sustainability in their teaching or their research. It's lots of meetings, obviously, lots of meetings with the senior team. So I have regular meetings with one of our deputy vice chancellors who chairs the Sustainability Management Committee. Often it's meeting our board members. So this week or last week, we met with them and some of the senior team and some of our academics to talk through our investment portfolio with our bank. Then you've got that kind of relationship piece of partners. We've got lots and lots of corporate partners. We've got lots of opportunities to, again, from an information point of view, think, actually, let's talk about what their needs are. And whether that's our corporate strategies, whether it's IBM or whether it's RSK or whether it's anybody that we work with on that sort of level. But it could be local authorities, it could be schools, it could be any number of other organizations who have an interest, that kind of mutual interest. From a month-by-month basis, it's, there's some really interesting projects that you can really get your teeth into. And I'm quite creative. I like a challenge. And there's lots of that in there. So it's pretty varied. On a monthly basis, you might not, next month, you just really don't know what's going to happen. And that is great because the way the sustainability kind of a trajectory is going is that, the next month's going to be more exciting and interesting than this month. And last month, to be honest, was incredibly exciting, as was this month. So it's kind of like you look forward, you positively look forward because there's always interesting, brilliant stuff to do.
I'm interested to pick up a bit more about student life and how sustainability is included in the curriculum. You've talked a little bit already about your working relationships with academic colleagues, and I wondered to what extent you and your team have supported them in developing their approaches with the curriculum.
Yeah, it's a really interesting space, Susanna. From an academic point of view, I suppose, is that, our teaching and learning community, they teach their subject areas, they're experts in that. We've got to respect that. And what we find is that there's lots of academics that are already integrating sustainability on their own back, doing sustainability really well. But within Greenwich, what we want to do, and one of our KPIs, is to ensure that by 2030, all of our students will have graduated with the ability to solve real world problems using the Sustainable Development Goals, applying really interesting sustainability principles. So what we've done in the past is just let our academics kind of do what they can do with our support and guidance, by just updating and providing those really interesting elements to their programs going forward. We've now, through what we call the curriculum shape and the curriculum framework, is now this kind of formalized way of making sure that things like employability, sustainability, kind of those kind of broader kind of EDI elements are part of our formal curriculum. So now we've got this, we've got a framework that has to be, integrated within all programs as they're validated and revalidated. And where we will work, it's not like a one size fits all approach. What we'll do is to make sure that, the way that we're looking for those academics to integrate sustainability is relevant. It's relevant to the program. It's relevant to sustainability. It illustrates a practical element. It enables students to realize actually sustainability is a real thing. I can see how it works. I can get some experience. Maybe I can get a placement, or a sandwich course relating to this. So this becomes part of our kind of employability element as well. And ultimately, at the end of the day, pretty much every single employer will be challenged by sustainability in some way, shape, or form. They will be looking for graduates that have got the capabilities, the skills, the knowledge, the attitude to help them solve these challenges. And I think at Greenwich, what we're really trying to do is to say, well, if all graduates are going to leave with the ability to solve real world problems, then what we're doing is ensuring that can happen.
The University of Greenwich has 3 campuses. Its main one at the World Heritage Site, right in the centre of Greenwich, a campus in Avery Hill, which is further out in southeast London, and a third campus in the Medway in Kent. From an estate's point of view, what are the opportunities and challenges for the sustainability strategy within those 3 really quite different campuses?
Yeah, and they are. So anyone familiar with Greenwich particularly, the university has 3 of those kind of jewels in the crown buildings right on the river. We also have quite a lot of other large buildings at our estate in Greenwich. So just taking those historic buildings, Grade 1 listed buildings built by Sir Christopher Wren, and it was really hot last week. It was incredibly hot. Yet those buildings were really cool. Thinking 400 years ago, these architects really knew how to build buildings that had natural cooling, heating, these sorts of things. So, but that creates a challenge nowadays, so that we can't have these huge fires that were log fired or whatever, that they did 400 years ago. We've got to decarbonize those estates. So how do we do it? Because we're not allowed to even put a bit of blue tack on the wall there because of the historic requirements. So the question for us is to how do we kind of take the gas out of those buildings? How do we decarbonize them? And that becomes a bit more of a challenge. So from a decarbonisation point of view, we've got to work with our local authority. So Royal Borough of Greenwich, we sit in there and really help to make the case for things like a district heating system, which we're aiming to have connected to us by 2033. So that would mean then there's a lot less impact in terms of the infrastructure needed. So rather than putting big electrical boilers in and all of the electrical requirements that would need, it's a lot easier, a lot less impact to do these sorts of things. So that estate is very precious. And again, we've on that site, it's a World Heritage Site, and we're just starting what's called the Devonport Hotel project, which is going to be our business school, Grade 2 listed building, where we're refurbishing that building to high environmental standards, and then building kind of an additional piece beside it, a modern part of the building, and that will be BREEAM excellent, zero carbon. But also has to, again, really make sure it doesn't impact on that historic World Heritage Site. Ultimately, we're going to have another 3,200 students there. So again, there's quite a lot of challenge and impact in terms of the numbers of students around our campuses. Avery Hill is completely different. It's kind of a newer campus. Some old buildings. We've decarbonised that by about 60% in the last year. So in beginning of 2024, we put a big air source heat pump system in there, connected up 4 of the buildings, I recall. So that's complete, decarbonised. The others will be completed by the end of 2027. Stack campus, that main campus, will be decarbonised by 2027, which would be great. Again, that aligns with our net zero goals. But it's surrounded by amazing natural spaces that we've developed, rather than being kind of mown grass. We kind of let nature return. So we've got we've got hedgehogs there. We've got dormice. We've got birds of prey. We've got, and that site particularly has been so successful by bringing nature back that we've got hundreds and hundreds of sightings of all sorts of different bird species, insect species, and animal species. And it's an incredible place to go to. I love spending time there. And it's not just a nature thing. It's not just that we're doing it for nature. What we're trying to do is to connect up our campuses to our students. So again, bring students in and say, well, actually, how does nature connect to them from a well-being point of view? Again, students are relatively stressed. They haven't got, they're on their phones a lot. So how do we help change that? How do we nudge them to use green spaces as part of that kind of well-being strategy that I think people need more and more of nowadays? But it's also the teaching environments as well. So how do we bring our health students, our education students there? How do we bring our architectural students in there? Because across so many disciplines, we can use nature as a classroom. And I can guarantee that any student that we teach using nature or natural spaces as their classroom, they'll always remember those lectures or those times. They probably won't remember so many of their lectures in their lecture theatres, but they'll remember, being asked to put a frog in their hand or to go pond dipping or whatever else it is. They'll remember all these things because it's so different. But what we want to do is to make sure they've got that legacy. They'll, again, get out in the park on a weekend, do these sorts of things, because if people don't connect with nature, then they don't necessarily connect with their futures. They need to protect nature. So that's a really interesting piece. But Medway is kind of really different. It's a Georgian naval college, ultimately. Beautiful red brick buildings. It's probably my favourite campus just because it feels just so normal there. Not normal, but just natural. I feel relaxed there, should we say, because it's just beautiful trees and buildings. And it's kind of home of our faculty for engineering and science. And because of their work, it's certainly around sustainability. So there's always really interesting conversations when I bump into people there. But again, we've got to decarbonise that, and that'll be through a partnership with the Medway Council. But there's lots and lots of other work we're doing there. We're setting up things like edible gardens there. But yeah, it's a really interesting space as well.
You've touched a little bit in what you've said about partnerships and partners that you work with. Could you just give us a bit more insight about, I guess, the range of partners that you work with in what you're delivering at the university?
Yeah, it's kind of an interesting one, Susanna. We've got the partnerships team within the university, and that I think spurred on quite a lot of change within our sustainability kind of culture really within the organization. So what we've done is to make sure that kind of pretty much going forward, that sustainability is part of all of our partnership working. And the more that we can talk about sustainability, opportunities and challenges within any partnership, the more they begin kind of think, I hadn't realized this was such a thing. I didn't, let's talk more about this because we need to think about this, or there's some solutions here that, we can kind of connect that innovation piece up with the partnerships. And you begin having these really interesting conversations and moving them forward. So Charlton Athletic Football Club, who's our local football team, so they run a women's team and a male team, Green Again, for example. So it's kind of a takeover, sustainability takeover. So there's lots of talks, lots of visibility of sustainability around the campus. So using these sorts of partnerships, because again, Charlton, so now a championship team, they're keen on sustainability. They're keen on sort of seeing how they can kind of reach out to the community because it's such a strong community team. And we can use that because we can get our stories in the match day programs to talk about sustainability, encouraging people to reduce their impact on, when they're maybe at the ground or maybe at home. So we can kind of like make the impact bigger. We can accelerate or amplify impact through those partnerships. So again, and whether that's the Royal Borough of Greenwich or Medway Council, we can do that the same. And I've got a meeting tomorrow actually with kind of anchor institutions of Greenwich to think actually to kind of pull us together. What's the NHS Trust, whether it's our educational bodies, whether it's big employers. They're all interested in kind of seeing how we can kind of work together better. And often we've got similar outcomes that we want. We want better health. We want lower impacts. We want economic growth, and sustainability kind of oils all those wheels. But beyond that, also we have organisations that kind of reach out to us because we're doing sustainability really well at Greenwich. So IBM being one of them. So they they use this Oracle. It's basically an Oracle system, and lots of organizations use it for their payroll, for their procurement expenses, sort of booking your time off. And they were really keen to say, well, actually, how do we create a green HR element to this? So we got chatting, and they said, yeah, because Greenwich really gets sustainability, they wanted to collaborate with us. So we worked with them to develop this green HR tool. We delivered it and developed it at Greenwich. It's been brilliant. It won a big award last December. We've only been running it for about 6 months at that time. So you have, again, that real interest in working with organizations like ourselves who kind of really want to innovate to deliver sustainability. So from our IBM's point of view, they can now illustrate what we've done and kind of go out around the world saying, well, actually, we can do this with you now. So from our point of view, that opportunity to really think, actually, how do we make change happen? Sustainability, as I said, doesn't happen in silos. It happens by people reaching out and connecting and making that magic happen. And again, whoever we talk to, whether it's a local community energy company that wants to work with our students, whether it's a local school that wants to take some of our surplus furniture that we can't, no longer need, there are lots and lots of connections. So I think that visibility, that connection, that thing that a university isn't just kind of this closed walled area where it's a bit kind of snobby or, elitist. No, it's not. It's a really invaluable part of the community. So however we look at partnerships, we're always thinking, actually, how do we help?
And just looking at that idea of partnerships from a slightly different lens, I mean, you're chair of London Hire's sustainability group, and your university campus as well is close to several other HEIs in South East London. To what extent is that HE network important in achieving sustainability goals?
Yeah, it is. It really is. I think within the UK, there's quite a few different networks. The EAUC being kind of a national and kind of international network of kind of people like me, ultimately. And we come together, lots of information to be shared, lots of great stuff happening. Within London, I chair the London Hire Sustainability Network. And again, there's many institutions that need some support or need some guidance, some case study, or they want to visit you, see how you're doing it. So there's a real interest in learning from each other, and we've got to think from a sustainability point of view. Sustainability is not about competition; it's about collaboration. So that's where we come into play. So, for example, the Avery Hill, our kind of more kind of suburban campus, where I said we've got a big air source heat pump network there. That's quite groundbreaking. Not many other universities have completed that sort of project. So from our point of view, what we want to do is, and we do regularly, we encourage the local community, local London universities to that site so they can see what the opportunities and challenges and the realities are of putting these sorts of things in place. So you kind of overcome those, those issues that people have saying, oh, is that big air source heat pump? That's going to be really noisy. We can plop somebody right in the middle of these huge air source heat pumps, and they could hear a pin drop. It's that. So if you've got that, actually, I don't have to sell. This isn't an issue. This isn't something that's going to hold us back in terms of our development. Let's make that progression. So with the London Hire Sustainability Network, we every year we'll visit another campus. So this year we went to Reading because they're doing some really interesting work around biodiversity and some work around net zero, but also some of their kind of academic work. And we've been to Kingston University to look at a lot of their biodiversity work. We've been to Goldsmith. We kind of, because what we want to do is just to understand a bit more about the reality of what we're doing, whether it's about environmental management systems, whether it's about waste, whether it's about procurement, because that kind of on the ground thinking is really good. But again, ultimately, because those networks are really strong because we want to help each other, and it's not in our interest to keep all that kind of intellectual property to ourselves. Certainly not. And I wouldn't be working at Greenwich if that was what we should do.
Finishing up our conversation today, what advice would you give to colleagues who might be interested in working in sustainability within HE?
I think the starting point really would be kind of understanding what you like about sustainability. Because again, sustainability is lots of things. It's about behavior change. It's about, what we buy and use, resource use, about energy use. It's about, recycling, all these sorts of things in nature and what have you. There is a piece really of kind of taking your interest or maybe your existing knowledge and thinking, actually, how can I apply that within the organization itself? And there's lots of ways of doing that. The first thing you do is probably go to your web pages, have a chat, see what their sustainability pages are, if there are any, and then just see what opportunities are. And if there are not, just email whoever's responsible and say, look, I'm really interested in helping in whatever way. Can we have a call? And the sustainability team will email back, hopefully in a day or two, and say, yep, sure, let's have that conversation. Because again, what we want to do in sustainability teams is enable other people to do kind of our work for us. We're not we're not being lazy, but there's just not really enough of us. So if we've got people that want to champion sustainability, then let's give them the tools, let's give them the knowledge, let's give them the permission to move their passion, their interests forward. So at the University of Greenwich, we've got 90 plus Green Champions. It's a great opportunity for our staff to learn about sustainability, to meet with others, to develop action plans, to do all these sorts of things that make a real difference. And if you're really passionate about this, then what we say is, look, have a chat with your head of department, faculty lead or whomever, and say, look, if you haven't already got one, I'd like to take on, it might not happen this year, it might happen next year, but I would like to have some professional development to get me there. You can also take that opportunity of thinking, well, actually, I'd like to go and shadow, the sustainability team. What day you're all in. I'd like to, see what you're doing, and identify really where those opportunities are. So again, at the University of Greenwich, we've got an environmental management system. To really deliver that on the ground across an organisation, you need a team of internal auditors. Great, we can train them. Doesn't cost the department anything. Those individual staff members can understand how to conduct environmental audits, learn a huge amount more, do that reporting, kind of build that knowledge. So you kind of, within any organisation, there are lots and lots of different ways of getting that knowledge. Because if you want that career, you can kind of practice. And if a job comes up and you've got a good understanding and you've got the character and think, actually, I've kind of helped you do all these sorts of things, then apply for the job. It's what you can do, what you've illustrated is really important. So if you are interested, really, what I'd say is just take action today. So if you've listened to this podcast and thought, actually, that's a really interesting career, go and follow it up. And again, just absorb information. That's what I've been doing since I was 8, watching David Attenborough film, programs. It's one of the few subject areas where I can look around the room that I'm at the moment, or any room full of people. I can create a relationship relating to sustainability to those items, or I can drum up a conversation with anyone in a room about sustainability. And that's rare. If I was kind of an accountant or, somebody in IT, probably limited. But from a sustainability point of view, you've got that whole world to talk to around what you want to do. And you're in a really amazing place because you're one of the relatively few that understand the journey that we need to take between now in a pretty unsustainable position to one where we need to get to, which is essentially making sure that the planet, that when I pass on my mortal call or whatever it is, I can say, actually, I've done all I can do and I've made this planet better, so that my children and my grandchildren can recognize and value that. And I think if we realize that that's part of our vision is to do something positive, then everybody should do something sustainably. And we can all move towards that. And if you can do that as a career, and again, bearing in mind, sustainability is not going to, it's not going to go anywhere. It's going to grow in terms of the skills, the knowledge, the capabilities, the passion, the motivation, all those things. If you want to make a change, act now. Start on that journey, because it'll be amazing. It'll be absolutely amazing. And the one thing that you'll do is when you go to bed at night, you'll look back and think, actually, today was great. I made a difference. And every day's like that. And every day when you wake up, it's Monday morning, you look forward to going to work. And I couldn't count on my hands the number of days that I've said, actually, I'm not looking forward to going to work today, because you're doing good stuff. And that is not always possible in a job. So please do, if you're interested, go and do something positive around sustainability. It's amazing.
Simon, thank you so much for sharing your reflections and for being my guest today.
Thank you, Susanna. It's been a pleasure.
Job Shadowing HE was written and presented by Susanna Marsden, and you can find out more information about her consultancy work at susannamarsden.co.uk. Audio production and music was by me, Rodri Marsden. Find out more about this podcast and hear previous episodes at jobshadowinghe.com.